Hey everybody, welcome back to the channel Ex Psychic Saved with me, Jen Nitza, your friendly former psychic medium saved by the amazing grace of our Lord and Savior Jesus Christ. The Kabbalah and Mysticism, that is the topic of this video today. And joining me to share the truth and expose the dangers of this false ideology, this false religion, this false philosophy is my dear sister in Christ, Marcia Montenegro, famous for I have an article for everything. You can find Marcia at christiananswersnewage.com. And I really recommend that you do that. Kabbalah? All right. Let me tell you what I think about it in just a minute. Stay tuned for this video. You don't want to miss it. Hey everybody, welcome to this video, Kabbalah and Mysticism. What's it all about? If you're anything like me, my friends, you may remember back in the day, I'm born in 77, so hello, I grew up in the 80s, but I remember the transition with Madonna wearing that little red bracelet. And hearing about Kabbalah, but I didn't really know much about it, so I'm super excited to hear all that Marcia has to share with us today. And I have one other experience I want to share, but I'm going to bring Marcia Montenegro on right now. Love our sister in Christ, Marcia. Thank you for being here.
Hi, Jen. How are you?
Hi. Okay, you look beautiful.
Well, thank you. I have on my glasses because I'm going to be glancing at my Kabbalah article. So
I'm
it
going to
helps
match
me
with
see
you.
the computer a little bit better.
Marcia, thank you so much for joining me today to discuss the Kabbalah. I'm so appreciative. I know you have an article about it, and I really encourage people to go check that out. I have a personal experience, a story that I would like to share with you. And I'm really curious as to what you're going to say about it. And I think it could really help everybody listening and watching today. I know somebody that actually started telling me about the Kabbalah quite some time ago. And I sat there and just listened to her. She was talking about Jewish mysticism. She is a cultural Jewish person, culturally Jewish, which I understand because I was raised culturally Catholic, so I get it. Yet it seemed like a lot of mixing in other things. She started talking about reincarnation. And in my mind, it was like, does a true Jewish person or does Judaism even subscribe to reincarnation? What? I don't know. So I don't know from it. So I'm listening to this woman, totally just giving her time to talk about it, waiting for my opportunity to talk about why reincarnation, of course, is a doctrine of demons, and pointing her to Jesus Christ. And that didn't go so well, Marcia. So she's talking about reincarnation, Kabbalah, Jewish mysticism. And once I said, but what if it didn't have anything to do with how good you think you could be, how good you think you are? What if it didn't have to do with any of that, but it had everything to do with what somebody did for you, not what you can do, right? So she goes to me, what do you mean? Jesus? And then the eyes like rolled up into the back of her head. No, seriously. And I have spoken to some people that are very kind, and they just as I let her speak with love in my heart, other people will let me speak at times. But that reaction. I guess I shouldn't say it was shocking, but in a way. So here's my question. I know we're going to talk about Kabbalah, the Kabbalah in general. What on earth was she talking about,
Yeah.
Marcia?
Yeah, I know. And this whole thing with the Kabbalah and Judaism is very confusing to a lot of people because a lot of people wrongly think that the Kabbalah is ancient and is something that was maybe even taught before Christ, that it existed way back then. It's somehow connected to the teachings of Judaism. And so there's a lot of confusion on it. And it would help if people understood that the Kabbalah is not connected to, biblical Judaism, to the Old Testament in any way. it is not connected to really the facts of historical Judaism and how Judaism has been taught, um, mainly uh, even after Christ. It is a sect, maybe is the best word, SECT, that developed around the 12th and 13th centuries into up
Mhm.
to the 16th century. But it is based on or seemed to draw from some ancient Jewish mystical teachings from the Second Temple time period. So we're looking at maybe a couple of hundred years before Christ up until maybe the first century, um, uh, first century AD,
Mhm.
which you now see as Common Era CE. Now they call it CE, they don't call it AD anymore. So that time period there, there was a lot of mysticism, Jewish mysticism, and what you find in the Kabbalah seems to be heavily influenced by that, along with other things that were imported into it. But it became part of some Jewish teachings that leaned towards the esoteric, that leaned towards, like secret teachings that had to be taught to you. It wasn't something you could just decide you would learn on your own. It had to be taught by somebody who knew all of this stuff. And that started a process where you have, Jewish people who, actually Jewish men traditionally, who learn the Kabbalah, and they see it as a teaching that is from God, even though it is not connected at all to any teachings in the Hebrew scriptures or the Torah, but it connects itself to the Torah. So I guess what I'm trying to say is a lot of Jewish people, like this woman you were talking to, have heard of the Kabbalah. They know it's this special kind of mystical teaching, and it has this appeal, just like the occult has an appeal, just like
Okay.
astrology has an appeal, reincarnation has an appeal. Um, those kind of teachings that attract certain people,
Mhm.
that aspect of the Kabbalah will attract people to the Kabbalah, and they probably think it is ancient. They probably do think it's ancient wisdom. And that gives the Kabbalah more credibility. The fact that it's perceived as being ancient and not having just started around, the 12th or 13th centuries. So there's that whole aspect to it of the ancient wisdom, which is actually false,
Mhm.
but it's kind of built into what people hear about it and the way it presents itself. Because when you go to the teachings of the Kabbalah, they're talking about the Torah, they're talking about Abraham, they're talking about biblical figures in the Old Testament, but they're giving these special teachings about them. So, so the Kabbalah came about from the very beginning when it was first kind of brought into the light, so to speak. It was there was a man named Moses de Leon in the 13th century, and he claimed that these writings, which were in Aramaic, by the way,
Mhm.
were ancient and they had been concealed, but he had discovered them. So he said he copied these manuscripts and they had all this symbolism in them. And he also wrote some of the text, probably with some other followers. This was something that, nobody has the exact details on how it all came about. You have these men who are writing things and making claims, and people who believed them, and then it kind of grows from there. It
Mhm.
just kind of develops from there. And then you have people who are perceiving this as actually ancient, so they're thinking what they're reading are things that were written, like, you know, centuries before, back around the time of Christ and before, well, actually before Christ. So you have this perception of it going way back, and this basically that these are teachings that are in the Torah that people didn't know. They didn't know and they didn't understand it. And here are these kind of hidden teachings, and the
Mhm.
meanings of the writings in the Torah have to be uncovered. So
Mhm.
there's this whole idea that there's like a hidden messages and hidden meanings in the Torah. That's basically what it comes down to with the Kabbalah. And these people who wrote it, it became very influential at the time because in Europe and around that time period, the 12th, 13th, 14th, and 15th centuries, there was a huge influx of occultism. There were all these esoteric groups and teachings all over Europe with different leaders of different groups. This is where a lot of this so-called secret societies began, was during this time
Mhm.
period. And there's also a lot of lore about them. That a lot of this is so typical of the occult. One thing I want to point out with the Kabbalah is, as we talk about it, is I want to show how you can recognize these marks of the occult and Gnosticism with the Kabbalah, because it
Mhm.
goes way back to really, it drew from things from Gnosticism and Second Temple Jewish mysticism. So you can see the hallmarks of those kind of ideas in the Kabbalah if you know what to look for, if you know how to recognize them. And one of the things, of course, I've already mentioned, and that's the idea that there's a hidden meaning in something.
Mhm.
So you have
Mhm.
the plain words. You're reading Torah, you're reading about Abraham, you're reading about Abraham taking Isaac up to the mountain. Okay, well, you read it as somebody who believes the Bible, you read it for what it is saying as a historical account. And then God tells us what it means, especially in the New Testament, the reference to Abraham
Mhm.
and Isaac. God will supply, the sacrifice. Okay,
Right.
how it points to Jesus Christ. That's not a hidden meaning. It's a meaning that in that story you don't see right away, but later when you're reading the whole Bible and you see
Mhm.
references to it, you see that there was a meaning there that God is going to reveal. It's not like you're having to dig and understand secret symbols and stuff to get the meaning. So there's the Bible uncovers the meaning for us. We learn the meaning of Scripture through the context of the passage and the whole Bible, through understanding its relationship to other passages, etc. But in the Kabbalah, there are these secret hidden meanings that are given to it. So the story of Abraham and all the other stories become these messages that are not at all connected really to Scripture. And one of the things about this, so that's one of the characteristics of the occult, is when somebody says that there's a hidden meaning in something.
Right.
It has to be uncovered, or that it's not just an account, a historical account, but all these things symbolize something. So when you start talking about that and a hidden meaning, then you're kind of stepping over into an occult worldview.
Mhm.
Um, so the whole idea that these were allegedly concealed and then rediscovered is of course very fishy as well. And it's kind of like, well, why were they hidden and who hid them? And why did somebody suddenly discover them, like 1400
Mhm.
years later or something? So there's a lot of that, raises a lot of questions just by itself. Now, before I go more into that, I want to mention that the creator in the Kabbalah is called Ein, or actually it's pronounced En Sof.
Mhm.
It's usually spelled EIN, and it's two words, SOF, which means without end or endlessness,
Wow.
infinity. This refers to the creator, and Ein Sof pervades all creation. So, and Ein Sof is not necessarily God. And this is where it gets a little complicated. It's like sometimes they'll say Ein Sof is God, but then it depends on who you mean by God, because God can also be something else in the Kabbalah, not the creator God. So it gets a little confusing. But Ein Sof, who is the creator, pervades all creation. So even a stone has divinity. So everything
Wow.
has divinity.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's very panentheistic.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and
Such.
so the Ein Sof emanated a spark. This is how creation came to be. Ein Sof emanated a spark, and this created what's called the upper world. And then a lower world was created from a light without brightness, which represents lower consciousness. As usual in esoteric occult teachings, everything represents something else.
Mm-hmm.
Nothing is what it seems, basically. That's what you come down to. Nothing is what
Mm-hmm.
it seems. So the world came from the spark, and then various points of emanation of the divine being came from that. And then Ein Sof descended through these points until the physical world resulted. And then there's different, interpretations too. Some Kabbalah commentators say this original light was hidden in the Garden of Eden,
Mm-hmm.
and some say it was hidden in the Torah. So the Torah actually in the Kabbalah, which is the first 5 books of the Bible, the Torah, just I think I should say that because some people may not know
Mm-hmm.
what the Torah is. I don't know. It's the first 5 books of the Bible. So the Torah becomes sort of this magical, symbolic book with esoteric meaning in the Kabbalah. That's what happens here. So you have this light that came in, and this whole light thing is very important in the Kabbalah. Um, and so this light energy created a vessel which had the desire to receive light. So the vessel received some of the creator's desire to share, but there was also the desire to give and the desire to receive light, and that shattered the vessel. And so the light withdrew, and that caused the Big Bang, and matter emanated.
Oh,
There's actually different stories of creation. I'm kind of
mhm.
giving a couple of them here. So that's another one where, uh, you have the Big Bang that came from the vessel shattering. Um, and that's the idea of light is very important in the Kabbalah. Also, what's important here, and this is, I think, another creation story, is the 22 letters of the Hebrew alphabet.
Mhm.
These are very significant in the Kabbalah. They're considered to be the sound of the 22 letters. And I think maybe actually the way they're written is considered to be like this magical power. So
Wow.
a frequency pattern with the letters of the Hebrew alphabet, which helped to mediate creation. So the letters themselves, and this is a quote from one of the Kabbalah books I read, arouse and harness the energy of the universe.
Wow.
See,
Oh
this
my
is,
gosh.
this is very occultic.
Yeah.
And also the idea of the light and Ein Sof descending through these various emanations, that idea is very Gnostic, because if
Mhm.
you look at some of the Gnostic accounts, and there's a lot of them. There's not just one. There's a whole lot of them. I recommend the book by Kurt Randolph, Kurt, and his last name is Randolph. He's an expert. He has a very good book called Gnosis, which I've read,
Mhm.
and it really helps understand Gnosis. It helps you understand Kabbalah if you understand or read about Gnosticism. You have the idea in Gnosticism is that there's this pure light and this purity, this pure energy, kind of untouchable energy. But as it descends into creation, the material creation, and becomes materialized, it becomes very dense and dark. And actually, this idea is in the New Age. This is an idea
Mhm.
I had
Mhm.
about the world, that the material world was very dense energy, and that you had to, raise your vibration to go up higher into higher energy, and spiritual
Mhm.
energy was much higher. And that's really very Gnostic. That's one of the Gnostic influences on the New Age. And so you find it here in the Kabbalah as well. So you have the material world, not having the kind of light that you have up in the upper world,
Hmm.
as they call it. So these letters, though, are these energies. The Hebrew alphabet has this energy, and you can actually meditate on these letters or recite them, or even just scanning the letters with your eyes will create a channel between the light of the creator and your soul, and thus create an internal change within the soul.
Which, of course, we know is none of this is true. I'm just going to point that out right now. None of this is true. And it's actually very saddening that the enemy comes up with, and all he has to do is prey, Prey, on the flesh and the sin nature of man to even desire to have hidden knowledge. And he's been doing this since the garden, uh, back in Genesis. So it's not true. I'm sorry. I hope I didn't cut you
No,
off.
no, no, no. That's fine. That's fine because I do have this little cough, so it gave me time to recover. Um, yeah. So see, actually scanning the letter with your eyes, even, or reciting them, so that creates the light from the creator can come into your soul. This is very obviously very esoteric, and it's very Gnostic. Um, so you see right away, we haven't even said much about the Kabbalah. I haven't been talking about it very long, maybe 10 minutes. And already we're knee deep into these
Yeah.
occult ideas, right?
Right. Which actually leads me to a couple of questions. Two things. One, I mentioned in the beginning in my introduction how uh, my first hint of knowledge, and it really wasn't knowledge, about the Kabbalah was Madonna and this big trend. And I'm listening to you speak, Marcia, and I'm kind of thinking what we saw in culture and maybe what we're even seeing today doesn't even sound like it's touching on the true roots of the Kabbalah, or maybe they're not even. I don't know. I don't want to speak to. I don't know. Does Madonna really know what the Kabbalah is? Is she just taking some of it and wearing a bracelet? What does the red string have to do with it? Do, why is it so trendy? And then I'm going to move into numerology and astrology, also being a part of the Kabbalah or overlapping. So
Or not.
or not, or
Yeah.
not.
Yeah, the bracelet. Okay, so there's actually two things going on here. I'm glad you brought up Madonna. You
Hmm.
have this Kabbalah thing that has been taught, since the Middle Ages, going on with these secret teachings. And traditionally, in order to learn the Kabbalah from you had to go to a rabbi who knew the Kabbalah. You had to be a man at least 40 years old who had studied the Torah. If you could not be a woman, and you had to be, I'm sorry, a married man. You had to be a married man at least age 40 who had really studied the Torah to qualify even to have a Kabbalah teacher teach you.
Wow.
So that was very strict, and it was very limited to that population. What happened is that some Kabbalah teachers started writing books and making it more, available, making the teachings available. There were some people like Rabbi Cooper, who wrote a book called God is a Verb, which I read. There's another guy named Daniel Matt, who wrote a book on the Kabbalah, which I read. Um, and as these teachings, I think maybe this started in the 80s, as
Mhm.
these teachings started getting, surfacing, and I think getting more popular, there was a man named, let's see, I think his first name, Yehuda Berg. Yehuda Berg, who's Jewish, a rabbi, he's a Jewish rabbi, decided to start the Kabbalah Center.
Mm.
And he started it, I think the first one was in Los Angeles. Eventually, there was one in New York City, and then there was a few overseas, I think in Europe. So the Kabbalah Center became this kind of, a lot of people called it pop Kabbalah.
Mm-hmm.
So it was kind of like the Kabbalah for the masses.
Mm-hmm.
And the traditional Jewish Kabbalah rabbis were just totally incensed by this. I mean, totally against it, totally angered by it. They look down on it. They've said it's not really the true teachings of the Kabbalah. It's not how the Kabbalah should be taught. So there is this split between the traditional Kabbalah teachings that I've been
Mm-hmm.
talking about and how they develop, and then this Kabbalah Center, which is the place where Madonna went to learn the Kabbalah. And so
Okay.
you have, and Britney Spears was also one of the clients or whatever, one of the students of the Kabbalah, and a lot of celebrities, a lot of other celebrities as well. I can't remember their names now, but when it was real popular in the early 2000s, a lot of celebrities were getting involved. And the red string, I think it was a red string bracelet
Right.
that was worn. It's called a bendel,
Mm-hmm.
and I think it was supposedly, it was cut from a long string that had been wrapped 7 times around the tomb of Rachel in Bethlehem.
Oh, for heaven's sakes.
Yeah, and
Oh,
and wearing it brings protection and luck.
wow.
Supposedly.
Right, right, right.
So
We
they're
know that's not
wearing
true.
this bendel that supposedly originally comes from the tomb of Rachel, and this is going to protect you. Basically, that's called an amulet and a charm in occultism. That's what it is, because any object that is supposed to protect you or bring you luck, draw good things to you, is an amulet or a charm. An amulet is for protection. A charm is to draw good things to you.
But
So
Marcia,
and
what
a charm.
I'm so sorry. What do they believe it's protecting you from?
Probably everything. Probably, protection from accidents. I'm just
Hmm.
guessing. I didn't read where they thought it was protecting them from. I just assumed it was the normal idea that most people would have. They would want protection from bad health. They would want protection from
Hmm.
accidents. They would want protection from maybe their partner leaving. I mean, who knows? I think this is
Right.
the idea that most people have. The ideas most people have with the idea of protection and luck. I think that's what they have.
Okay, because I'm just asking. Yeah,
Yeah,
I'm just asking because on a spiritual level, as a former New Ager myself, I wouldn't have told you anything about demons. I wouldn't have talked about hell,
no,
but
right,
I would speak
right,
about maybe negative energy
right.
versus
Negative
positive,
energy. Yes,
right? Or
yes.
something dark, good and bad, light and dark, something like that. So it's
I
kind of,
imagine that was probably the ideas that most of the people from the Kabbalah Center had, those New Age
yeah,
ideas,
yeah.
the negative energy type idea,
Hmm.
because so many people like Madonna going into something like Kabbalah probably already had some New Age ideas. So,
Hmm. Hmm.
the it's very compatible with the New Age. So you would think of protection from negative energy. That's a good way to
Hmm.
put it. That's a good way to put
Hmm.
it.
Hmm.
So Yehuda Berg has 2 sons who are rabbis. I'm not sure. I think maybe he's died. The main guy, Yehuda Berg. I meant to check on that. But he had Rabbi Philip Berg, who's written books. And I'm sorry, Yehuda Berg is his son. So I got the one of the names mixed up here. But um, he wrote The Power of the Kabbalah and the 72 Names of God, which is a very popular book.
Wow.
And they both help spread these teachings everywhere with the Kabbalah centers, and that made it even more popular, because now you have celebrities involved, so people notice that the celebrities talk about the Kabbalah, and you have more books being written by these people from the
Hmm.
Kabbalah Center, and it just becomes even more popular, even though these other books had already existed, like I mentioned, or they came along around that time, but they weren't connected to the Kabbalah Center, like God is a Verb by Rabbi David Cooper. Um, and so In fact, what Rabbi Cooper said is Jewish mysticism satisfies a need for a connection with the great unknown. We want to experience the secrets of other realities and the meaning of life. And he wrote, this also comes from his book, the Kabbalah discusses angels and demons, soul's journeys after death, reincarnation, resurrection, and the goal of achieving messianic consciousness.
Wow.
And now, let me mention too that even though these people, like Rabbi Cooper, as far as I know, was not connected to the Kabbalah Center, him writing that book was looked down on by the traditional Kabbalah teachers. The traditional Kabbalah rabbis do not approve of anybody making it accessible to whoever. They don't
Mm-hmm.
approve of writing popular books on the Kabbalah. They think the Kabbalah needs to be taught the way it has been to Jewish married men who are at least 40 years old and who have studied the Torah. They don't believe it should go outside of that. So
Mm-hmm.
you have a split there in what's going on in terms of how the Kabbalah is being propagated in the culture.
Mm-hmm.
Now, one of the things I wanted to point out about the way they look at the Torah, and this is important. This is another thing you can tell has to do with the occult. I kind of alluded to it, but this is a little more specific. You study the Torah on 4 levels, and it's the acronym is PRDS, which is the word stands for the word Pardes, which means an orchard or garden. I think
Mm-hmm.
it's where the word paradise comes from. So
Mm-hmm.
Pardes. The P is the literal level of the text that you're reading. It's just the literal level. R is the metaphors and the allegories and the parables. D, which stands for another, each of these stands for a word, means you're using additional material to interpret the text. So you're looking at outside material. And S stands for Samek, the secret hidden meanings that offer insights into the structure of the universe. This deepest level is very difficult and can only be grasped after considerable study. And the Torah is seen as a coded book that contains all the wisdom of creation. So there's this idea that if you uncover these mysteries of creation and the energies that existed and how things came to be and all of that, you're going to get wisdom of the universe, basically. This is also very esoteric. You see this over and over again in the occult, that there's some kind of key, that if you have this key, you can unlock,
Mm-hmm.
secrets. You can unlock all this knowledge.
Yeah.
You just have the right key. So you
Right.
find that all over the occult. I mean, it's just
Mm-hmm.
everywhere. It's also interesting to me. I found this very interesting that the earliest teaching of the Kabbalah is something called the Book of Formation.
Hmm.
This was supposedly revealed by the Creator to Abraham around 2000 BC.
Oh my goodness.
So, and Yehuda Bird claims that the Book of Mormon and the Quran cite the Book of Formation,
Oh,
and that
yes.
wisdom from this teaching went east and developed into Hinduism and Zen Buddhism. Well, just on the surface, this is ridiculous because,
Mm-hmm.
of course, there's no evidence for this. Number one, I mean, zero evidence. I don't know where he thinks the Book of Mormon and the Quran cite the book. I don't think they actually say the Book of Formation, but it's probably something written in there that he says is referencing the Book of Formation. I'm not sure what he's pointing to. But why would the Quran and the Book of Mormon reference it anyway? Because, I mean, for one thing, they don't teach the teachings of Mormon. The Book of Mormon, the Quran are
Right.
so dissimilar. It's almost funny to me. I actually laughed when I read this. I thought it was funny. And then they went and they developed into Hinduism. Well, I know how Zen Buddhism came about. It came from a conflation of Taoism and Buddhism.
Mhm.
And yes, Buddhism did originally come from Hinduism, but Zen Buddhism came out about a different way. So for him to say this helped develop the religions of Hinduism and Zen Buddhism is just, anybody who knows anything about those religions would just think that was ridiculous.
Mhm.
I want to move on to the very one of the most important things of the Kabbalah that I bet some people have heard about, even if they haven't heard of the Kabbalah, because I actually have people sometimes message me or email me and ask me about this particular thing, and they don't even know it's connected to the Kabbalah, and it's called the Tree of Life.
Mhm. Mhm.
Now, it is true. Let's keep in mind the Bible does mention that, well, there's a tree of life, of course, in the Garden of Eden, and there's a tree of life is mentioned in Revelation. And I think there's in Proverbs, there's some references to a tree of life in terms of it. It's a metaphor used in Proverbs
Mhm.
um, that I think is connected to wisdom or to God's word. I need to double check on that. But this tree of life that a lot of people are hearing about and are asking me about is the Kabbalah tree of life, and it is one of the most important teachings of the Kabbalah. So the tree of life, in fact, a lot of people have seen maybe that tree of life, the Kabbalah tree of life. In my article, let me tell people I have two articles.
Mhm.
They're very similar, but one was published in the Christian Research Journal, and I have a link to it from my website. If you look up Kabbalah on my website, it'll show you two articles. One of them, if you go to that one, there's a link that goes to the Christian Research Journal article. And the other one is the article on my website. They're very similar, they're somewhat different. I've worked on the article on my website some. Obviously, I don't have access to the article that's already published in the Christian Research Journal. I can't access it in order to edit it or add things to it or anything like that. But that's the article that was published. And I was asked to write on this topic. That's why I even wrote on it. I don't know if I would have ever chosen to write on it because it's such a
Mhm.
complicated area. But because I was asked to write on it, of course, I did do that. And then I kind of had my own article here that I can work on and add things to as I discover things, which I just did this morning, as a matter of fact. And I may get to what I did this morning. So the tree of life, though, if you go to my article on my website, I have two links embedded in here that will go to charts of the tree of life, so you can look at it and see what I'm talking about.
Hey, Marcia, let's take a look at the picture, and then maybe you could help us to understand it a little bit better.
It's an inverted tree, so the root is at the top. And
Mhm.
that's where the light, this represents this light. It represents aspects of Ein Sof. This is supposed to be an illustration of the creator Ein Sof and En Sof. So En Sof is this illustrated by this tree going downwards, and there are branches on it. Okay, there's the root, which is the first point. Then there's three branches, which each have 3 points. And the points on the right represent masculine positive energy, and the ones on the left are feminine negative energy. And the points in the middle balance the right and left. So now, right there, I want to say, as soon as you read something like that, or as soon as I read something like that, I know we're in the territory of the occult,
Right.
because the idea of a female and male side is Gnostic and also very occultic.
Mhm.
So everything has a male and female side, like the Ankh. The Ankh
Mhm.
that kind of looks like a cross. It actually was used in Egypt, and you can find it inscribed on tombs.
Mhm.
This was supposed to represent immortal life, and it is a combination of a symbol for male energy and female energy. So this male female thing is very occultic, and you have it in astrology too, where you have male
Mhm.
and female, and you have it everywhere in the occult. So this right away shows we're in the territory of the occult. So you have
Mhm.
positive, so because of course God cannot be illustrated with these points and having them one side male, one side female, and then having to have balance between them. You know,
Hmm.
it's this very complicated and really ungodly illustration of God. But they talk about this tree of life because this not only represents attributes of the deity, according to the Kabbalah, but it's how we can understand we ourselves are to ascend. We are supposed to climb this tree in order to. The whole idea of the Kabbalah is we have to have more light from the Creator into the universe. And one of the ways we do this, we open channels to the light by climbing this tree, this inverted tree of life. This is how we develop spiritually. So they, in my article, I name each of the points, all of the 10 points of the tree of life. There's 10 points. They each have a name. They each represent something. I'll give you two examples. The first one is Keter, which means crown, and that adorns the head of Adam. Okay, it's symbolic of Adam. Then there's another one called Bina, which is the womb or the divine mother. Okay, that's the divine mother.
Kind of reminds me of the chakras a little bit, like the crown chakra and it
Yeah,
just does. You
yeah.
know,
You
but
know, that's interesting because if you think of the chakras, they are through the body at different points, and
mhm,
they're channels supposedly of energy that
right.
can take the energy coming from, although in the body, in the chakras, they're coming from the bottom chakra to the top, whereas
Mhm,
here
mhm.
you're supposedly, well, the
From
top, the
here.
light is coming down and you're at the bottom and you're climbing up.
Right,
Oh yeah,
right.
but I can see there is kind of a similarity there. Yeah, I didn't think of the chakras. It's interesting that that kind of makes sense, Jen. Yeah, so you have all these different points that mean certain things. One means victory, one means splendor, one means foundation. Then finally, this the 10th point at the bottom, which is a very important point, and it's in the middle. It's called Malkut, which means kingdom. It's a manifestation of the material universe. So this is according to Philip Berg, and there's another one called Din. The fifth emanation is the beginning of the physical universe. And associated with that point, these points, by the way, are called Sephiras, Sefirah. And associated with that point is the archangel Samael. I'm not sure how
Oh,
they
cheese
say
and
it.
crackers.
Yeah, I knew you know that name.
Yes.
Samael. Yep, I knew you know that name. In the Kabbalah, he's known as the adversary. So now, when I was writing this article, I did not. I had come across that name. I vaguely knew he's Samael plays a role in Gnosticism and Gnostic stories, and also in the occult. I
Mm.
don't know how you know of that name.
Well, well, this is forgive me, I just have a quick question.
Yeah.
Because I'm thinking about all the information you're sharing. It coming up with these teachings, okay? These are people that are these are doctrines of demons, meaning I use that term all
Yes.
the time, meaning it's a teaching
Yes.
uh, of the demonic. It's not a teaching from the Holy Spirit. It's not of God. So this is a doctrine of demons. So were any of these people channeling, do you believe, to get some of these rules, to get some of these uh, uh, ideas that they're teaching? Uh, and if not channeling, I mean, certainly they were demonically oppressed, influencing them in the head. We know in Ephesians 6:12, we don't wrestle against flesh and blood, and there is a spiritual battle going on. I mean, these severely oppressed, if not possessed people at some point.
I,
Was there
it's,
channeling?
it's interesting you asked me that because I'm guessing you did not. You haven't read my article yet, have you?
Sorry, Marcia, no.
Okay, no, it's
I've
actually.
been so busy, and I like to have the
Oh, I know
surprise
that.
anyway.
No, I didn't expect you to have read it, and actually, it's kind of good you didn't because in my because it shows how perceptive you are. Because in my article, I have I write about the fact that the people who were writing this supposedly, um, okay, is it does mention that some are supposedly channeled
Wow.
it. I'm trying to find what I actually wrote here. I'm trying to just look, but I'm gonna
Hmm.
yeah, here. Well, I have channels all over the place because there's channels of light. Oh, I know where I have it. I'll put in this word. I actually referenced that. I just can't remember exactly where. Yeah, here we go. It is believed that Moses de Leon wrote some of the text. This is a text I talked about earlier that he said he had discovered. Um, Parts of the Zohar. Now, the text of the Kabbalah, and I somehow miss saying this. The so-called sacred texts or holy books of the Kabbalah is called the Zohar, which means the Book
Hmm.
of Splendor. The parts of the Zohar may have been transmitted through automatic writing. A
Wow. That's what I was
technique,
thinking.
yep, a
Hmm.
technique not unknown to Kabbalists, to Kabbalists. These are people who were into the Kabbalah, who meditated on a divine name of God, went into trance, and then wrote down words as their hands were guided. Now, that comes from the book by Daniel Matt,
Hmm.
Matt, who, as far as I know, is not connected to the Kabbalah Center. So
Hmm.
he's one of the Jewish rabbis who started writing about the Kabbalah, like Rabbi Cooper. So he wrote in his book that apparently this technique was not an unknown technique among those who were studying the Kabbalah, and they would meditate and go into trance and then write as their hands were guided. So your speculation on that is absolutely correct.
Hmm.
Um, that's very interesting. That's why when you said that, I was like, "Oh, hold the phone here. I'm gonna I'm gonna show that she knows what she's talking about." Doesn't that make you feel good? Okay.
Yes, in a way. Also, I'm not that proud of it either, as I was somebody who used to do automatic writing myself.
Uh-huh.
I've certainly channeled a lot,
Yes.
but that goes to show you. But that's another point that you've been
Yes.
making throughout this conversation of this pointing to the occult and how we
Yes.
see these occultic and even New Age practices coming in, and it's not a surprise, right? I mean, this is
No.
demonic. These are doctrines of demons. This is
These
not a
are,
shock.
yeah, yes, and that's why I was saying at the beginning that um that I wanted to show how things that I was pointing out here show that it is occultic.
Mhm.
And also I pointed out to some Gnostic aspects of it. So this is why, I want people, one thing for them to understand, they don't have to remember all of these details. I mean, I don't remember all of them. That's why I'm looking at my article. Um, is one thing I want to impress on people is how occultic and how dark it is. This is
Mhm.
very dark stuff, people. This
Right.
is stuff that you do not even want to be interested in. I mean, there's no point in reading about the Kabbalah unless you want to read my article. Okay. If you want to know anything, read my article, or if there's some other Christian who
Yeah.
knows about it and has written an article showing how it's occultic and is not scriptural, that's fine. But don't go and read, things by people who are like um, proponents of the Kabbalah or followers of
Mhm.
the Kabbalah, and don't read Kabbalah writings because this stuff is very dark. It is not. You don't want it in your head, is what I'm saying. You don't
Right.
want these
Thank you.
teachings in your head. So I wanted to mention Samael because I did look into him a little bit this morning. I got interested because he's a character that pops up in the occult. He goes back to the Book of Enoch, the Enochian writings.
I'm not
I don't
surprised.
think he's in Enoch 1. I'm not sure, but he's in other writings of Enoch. And I want to point out also, people always talk about, oh, the Book of Enoch, or Enoch 1 doesn't have all that really bad stuff that like Enoch 2 or 3 have. Well, I want to point out that those books are artificial constructs. It's actually called the Enochian writings, and they're all connected. Just because some of them were collected and put into one book that's called Enoch 1 does not mean it's not connected to the others. They're all coming from the same place. They all come from Jewish mysticism, which is very occultic. And so Samiel is mentioned in the Enochian writings, comes from Second Temple Judaism in apocryphal books and Talmudic midrash literature. He's one of those characters. He's supposedly a fallen angel, an archangel, but a fallen one, and he's tied into all kinds of stories that you find in this kind of literature, such as supposedly he was, I think, a husband of Lilith, who was supposed to be Adam's first wife. Lilith is another figure that's kind of
Yeah.
from the same kind of literature and Jewish mysticism. And I do have a Facebook post on Lilith, so I really should put it as an article on my website because it
Hmm.
would go along with with this.
Hmm.
And so you have so supposedly they were, I think, married, and but Lilith didn't want to be submissive to Adam, so she rebelled. And then there's all kinds of stories. I think another one was that that I just read this morning was that that Eve had Cain, like Adam was not Cain's father, Samuel was Cain's father, and
This is
so
just utterly.
their children were demon children. And
Hmm.
so Cain, this, it's just this, it's really, it's what it is Jewish mythology, but it's mythology that's occultic and demonic.
Right.
It's a demonic mythology. And this is the kind, these Jewish myths were in the church, in the early church. The early form of Gnosticism, which didn't develop until the second century, the early form of Gnosticism was in the church in the first century. It's referenced in First John, it's referenced in Colossians and some other books. That teaching was there, and it was a combination of this Jewish mysticism that I'm talking about, and the early Gnostic teachings. They were anti-matter. They said Jesus couldn't be in a physical body because the material world was evil. That was very Gnostic. But these myths that were around about coming from like the Enochian literature and other literature from Temple Judaism, all these crazy myths like about Enoch that you find in the book of Enoch, those were circulating as part of this early form of Gnosticism. And this is what is denounced in several books that mention don't follow myths, don't listen
Hmm.
to the myths, the mythologies. That's what they're referring to. They're referring to this kind of stuff that we're talking about.
Right. Right.
So the Kabbalah, even though it wasn't originally written as the Kabbalah until maybe the from the 13th to the 15th, 16th centuries, it drew from this early Jewish occult mysticism. It drew from a lot of these earlier writings and mythologies. So this is another caution about it, that it's drawing from these kind of ideas that are very anti-biblical. They're the kind of things that, um, you know, go against God and go against Christ. It's all a way to pull you into the idea that you can have this secret knowledge,
Hmm.
have this secret understanding of the universe and the secret understanding of who God really is according to the Kabbalah. So this is just something to avoid. Also, the idea is that you yourself can connect to the light of the Creator, and you yourself. It's the idea of the Kabbalah is if enough people in the universe, connect and make themselves channels of light, they can repair the world, and we can recreate paradise. That's the end game in the Kabbalah. Is that
Do
we
they think,
paradise.
but for what, okay, so would that mean for eternity? Do they believe that they would go on forever in this new paradise and that
Um,
they've created
yeah,
themselves?
my understanding is yes, that's my understanding.
Okay.
Now, I haven't read a lot on that part of it, and I didn't see a lot in what I was reading, so I haven't really researched that. But my understanding is, yeah, that would they recreate paradise, and then it becomes like the Garden of Eden again.
Right. Okay.
And I'm there.
Yeah.
Imagine there's more to it. That maybe there's certain things you have to do. Then maybe it probably connects to the tree of life. But then you would become so spiritual. You would have so much light. See, you wouldn't die because you would be this complete
So
channel
like
of light.
ascended. Yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, with that
So
high
so
vibration and
you've ascended, yeah, to the,
mhm.
the top of the tree of life. So then you have paradise and you can restore it for the whole world. The whole world can be in that state if enough people are connecting to these sources or to these source of light through these teachings and these different methods. So that is the end goal. The end game here is to restore paradise. I
Oh,
wanted to mention the Zohar again because I should have mentioned it earlier that the Book of Splendor, it's actually multi volumes. And it's in the Zohar that you find conversations between these legendary rabbis mixed in with commentaries on the hidden meanings of the Torah. So, when I was talking earlier about how it's all about the hidden meanings of the Torah, that's what the Zohar talks about. And in one of the books I read, I think it was Daniel Matt, he gives excerpts from it. So you can actually read excerpts from the Zohar. And there are these dialogues between the rabbis, and they're talking about things like Abraham's sacrifice, or they're talking about, another biblical character. Um, and they're talking about it in terms of getting at the real hidden meaning of it.
it makes it that much more deceptive. It kind of reminds me in a sense of Christian witches or Christian psychics. And if you throw anything, in our camp, let's say of Christianity, and you use words like holy or angels or anything that could be biblical or from the Bible, and they try to mix it in there, which makes it a little bit more maybe appealing to people thinking that this must be a godly situation or a holy situation. So it's interesting that they're trying to mix in the Bible, uh, right. So it's very deceptive. Marcia, some people may not be familiar with the Kabbalah or the teachings of the Kabbalah, but a lot of people are familiar with astrology, numerology, and other tools of divination. Does astrology and numerology have any part to play in the Kabbalah? And if so, what?
That's kind of an overview of some of the aspects of the Kabbalah. And if people want to read more, they can read my article. But I do want to say sometimes you will run across books, or, I saw lots of them, like a book on astrology, and it would connect it to the Kabbalah,
Hmm.
or a book on numerology connected to, and numerology is connected through something called gematria, which I did not
Hmm.
discuss. Um, but a lot of this, except for maybe the gematria, but things like astrology or tarot cards, I've seen that too. Tarot cards trying to be connected to the Kabbalah are probably things that were added in later. These
Hmm.
were people who were drawn to the Kabbalah naturally because if they were already into something occultic like astrology, the Kabbalah would appeal to them.
Hmm.
And then they kind of would try to tie them together. So there were later writings that were about these other occult practices like astrology. But as far as I know, and I don't know for sure, it's not in the Zohar. It's not in the original teachings, but it came to be connected later. Now, gematria is the idea that each Hebrew letter of the alphabet is a number, and so you can read. Then there's a code because the numbers all mean something, and so
Hmm.
this word has these numbers, so it means this. And
Hmm.
that's done with the Kabbalah. That is done with the Kabbalah, and that's of course numerology. So
Right.
there you're giving a meaning to a number that doesn't exist, just like giving the meaning to a planet. Venus doesn't really represent relationships. The moon doesn't really represent maternal energy. It's the
Hmm.
moon. It's the planet Venus, and it has physical
Hmm.
aspects to it. So, number 7 is the number 7, number 4 is number 4. Yes, in the Bible, we see numbers repeated because, and within the context of scripture, there seems to be a connection, sometimes, but God doesn't actually come out and tell us this number means this. We have to be real careful when we not overinterpret, things in the
Yeah.
Bible that isn't.
Nor does he tell us to look into
Yeah,
numbers for
yeah,
hidden meanings, which you keep going back to, looking for hidden meanings or
looking for hidden meanings. Yeah, we don't want to do that. So this other stuff, because the Kabbalah is occultic itself, it has led to a lot of people in the occult using
okay.
it for that purpose, and they like, some people like to connect their teachings to the Kabbalah.
Okay.
So you have a whole slew of books and things going on, that will cite the Kabbalah, and whether all of that is probably not in the Zohar itself. But of course, there's a lot of writings about the Kabbalah that are taken as being from the Kabbalah, and how, the traditional, maybe Jewish rabbis view that. I'm not sure. They probably, I'm guessing they probably don't view it kindly, because they tend to be very strict, like it needs to be done, this way, and it has this limitation, and you can't go outside it. I do want to mention the way I first heard about, I think the first way I heard about the Kabbalah, um, I may have heard of it, but the first time I really was in contact with it was when I was teaching astrology at this organization. They decided to offer a 2-year course on the Kabbalah,
Oh, wow.
and you had to sign up for the full 2 years. So even if you went for 1 year, and then for whatever reason you didn't want to finish, or you moved away or something, you still had to pay for the 2 years. So
Wow.
a lot of my I was teaching astrology there. A lot of my astrology students took the Kabbalah class. And then they would tell me in class, they would say, I would be talking about something in astrology, and they would say, oh, we learned about that in the Kabbalah class. So
Mhm.
I think that whatever was being taught, I did not take the course. I didn't want to sign up for a 2-year course. And I didn't really think I wasn't that interested in it. I was curious about it, but I wasn't interested enough to learn it. Who I think whatever was being taught there, the teachers were not, they were not rabbis, and they were not, I don't even know if they were Jewish. I think they were taking what things from the Kabbalah they read about, or whatever literature they got, and they were maybe imposing other things on it, mixing other things
Mhm.
with it, like astrology. I don't know, but that was an ongoing thing for 2 year, that 2-year course going on at that class, and it drew in a lot of students to that place where I taught, which was ironically called the Foundation of Truth.
Up there, very ironically. So now, so isn't it
I
ironic?
have to laugh. I just have to laugh every time I think about it, because I think one time I said, yeah, or somebody said, yeah, it should be called the sinking sand of falsehood. And I was like,
Yeah, that sounds about right.
I'm like, so this is all deceptive, people. I hope that you've understood from the things I've said how occultic and Gnostic and anti-God this material really is. It's very, very esoteric and deceptive.
Marcia, I cannot thank you enough for sharing. All the books that you read, all the research that you do. Thank you. I don't have to do it now. No, I'm only kidding. I'll read yours
Yeah,
so that I
sweetheart.
can get
Oh,
all the, so you can impart onto us all the books that you've read in the time. No, honestly, it's so appreciated. I mean, we all have our ministries. We all are called by God in different directions, and this
yes,
happens to be
yes,
your ministry. And you always heed God's call to do what He wants you to do, and you have a heart for the lost and to help us out there to be educated so that we can also share that with people that may not know. So we need to know these things, guys. Christians, you need to know all about these false religions, these false philosophies, the new age concepts, ideologies, so on and so forth, because it is still relevant, present, and still as much of a demonic doctrine of demons and plague in our world, especially in our culture now with social media and the music industry and the celebrities and all of that. So we need to know about this, guys. Go to Marcia's website, christiananswersnewage.com. Put Kabbalah in the search bar and her articles will pop up. Marcia, I love you.
Thank you so
And
much.
I look forward to seeing you again. Guys, we're going to get together and do some stuff before Christmas about the Magi. Marcia is a former astrologer. You can see our other videos on my channel. You can click on the live tab and look at the lives that we've done. We've done quite a few lives together. Our most recent video was about frequency and vibrations, and I'll put the link down below. And I also would like to put your testimony. I have Marcia's testimony. Woohoo! Put that down below too, so you could learn a little bit more about Marcia if you haven't seen her before, which I doubt. But if you haven't, you could check her out. But thank you, Marcia. God bless you, sister.
Thank you for having me, Jen.
Always a pleasure. And remember, guys out there, share the gospel today and share your testimony as well, because you have nothing to lose, but that person has everything to gain. God bless you. Hope to see you next time on Ex Psychic Saved.